NIFA at USDA. We are very, very excited to be here. We look forward to this each and every year, and we're going to really look forward to it when we can actually see you in face-to-face. So with that, let's talk about a little housekeeping. So we hope you will all continue to join us by video. We always love to see you and see your faces. So if you turn your cameras on, we always like that. You can use chat to ask any questions you might have, and you can turn your captioning off or on using the symbol at the bottom of your screen. I want to stop here for just a second and make sure everybody has the information they need to successfully be a part this afternoon. Are there any questions? All right. If not, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the SCIFAR PDTA team. You can see that we're up here on the screen. My name is Lynne Borden. I'm at the University of Minnesota. I'm an associate dean in the College of Extension. And along with my colleague, Dr. Daniel Perkins, we co-PI this grant. However, we could never do this work, never ever, without the amazing teams that we have. You'll see that Mark Otto is the project director. Adia Richmond is our senior researcher. Suzanne Van den Hagenhoff. Okay, Suzanne, I pray I did it better today. Stephanie Nunn is an evaluation specialist. Philip Ely is our coaching coordinator and implementation specialist. And Sarah Butler takes care of grants program management. We love our team. We think they work extraordinarily hard to support the work you do. But another important component to this team are our coaches. So our coaches are Autumn Gune, who's at North Carolina State, Carrie Asher at the University of Kentucky, Candy Darenfield is at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Pam Payne is at the University of Nevada, Reno, Jennifer Wells Marshall is at Auburn, Misty Blue Terry is at North Carolina A&T State University, and Philip is at Penn State, as we said before. I want to really, excuse me. Sorry, I got so excited about our coaches that these people work with you intensely. They make calls, they're available to you. They will provide you information to help ensure your projects are successful. Any member of the SCIFAR PDTA team is there to assist you in many ways. The coaches call, so you have a person and a face to connect to. So I want you to know how much we believe in our coaching model. We think it helps really make that link between the expectations of the grant and your success, both in implementation, evaluation, and sustainability. Okay, we have our projects. We thought you'd be excited to see where all the projects are. The projects are across the United States over a 5-year period. We generally average around 43 programs. Sometimes the number goes up a little and sometimes the number comes down a little. But as you can see, we have projects in the territories as well as across the United States. So let's talk about the logistics. We're really excited you're here. I think most of you have already registered using sketch.com. It allows you to select sessions. It allows you to navigate to your sessions. All are on Zoom. The links are available there. And if you need any help, the SCIFAR team will be in each session, can provide you any assistance necessary. We know sometimes things don't go as smooth as we'd like them to, but we're hoping with a lot of support around you, we'll be able to move people quickly and efficiently to the different sessions. So what do we got in store for you today? I need a new slide, please. So we have a keynote speaker and Dr. Torie Weiston-Serdan and Torie, I'm going to apologize because I know I just really did a bad job. I'll hope that Danny, would you say it properly, please?
Yes, Torie Weiston-Serdan.
Thank you. I massacred it. My apologies. But we're thrilled you're here. She's going to do the keynote. And then we have sessions on working with youth experiencing poverty and homelessness, program quality, and dissemination. So we hope you will look forward to each one of these sessions. Let's look at the rest of the Thursday and Friday. Tomorrow is an important day. We start the day with you having time to meet with your coaches. We know that that is a particularly popular time because you get to meet them, ask them questions, and see who else is part of your coaching cadre. Then Dr. Williams will do USDA Coffee and Conversations. We want to thank all of you who submitted your questions ahead of time and gave us feedback. Thank you so much. Then we have speakers who are experts in forming partnerships with vulnerable groups, evaluation and statistical methods, nutrition and coaching. And then on Friday, we will we have sessions on identity and relationships, workforce development, youth program quality, inclusive design, and collaborating with youth. And our keynote for that session, Suzanne, can you remind me the keynote for that one?
Certainly, the keynote for Friday is Jose Rosario, who is a PhD student in California, and he talks about identity building.
Yeah, identity building. So as you can see, we have tried to find a variety of sessions and speakers that can assist you in building your capacity to facilitate the work of your SCIFAR SCP. We know that you have lots of different programming going on, everything from grandparents raising grandchildren to early childhood gardens to workforce development with our youth. So you can see that we have tried to make sure that we touch all of those places. Moreover, one of our goals in our grant is to do nutrition. So we wanted to make sure that we continue to support that area, and you can see we have a session on that. Okay, next. So we also have some exciting new things for you. So Karen Sterling is from Drawing Insights, and she's going to do some visualization drawing while we do some of our sessions, just to provide another way to think about the topics being shared, think about how that information is being used. And then once they're done, the pieces that she does, we will make available to you so you too can use it. And then you will receive a book to extend the conversation in selected sessions. Now, this is the carrot. The carrot is you don't know which session these books will be coming in, and you have to be present in order to get your book. So it's important that you attend all sessions so that you're eligible to find out which one we put the books in. All right, thank you. So now it is really my pleasure to welcome you all and to introduce our national program leader, Dr. Bonita Williams. Dr. Williams provides national leadership for the Vulnerable Populations Program with an emphasis on the coordination and integration of programs that address the needs of youth living with social, emotional, physical, developmental, and mental vulnerabilities in relationship to context, residence, and demographics. The program includes providing leadership and management of the Children, Youth, and Families at Risk program. Prior to coming to NIFA, Dr. Williams served as an assistant professor and extension specialist with Virginia Tech, youth at risk specialist with Lincoln University as a family consumer science and 4-H agent with North Carolina Extension Program. She received a PhD in career and technical education with a concentration in educational research and evaluation from the University of Missouri-Columbia. She received a Master's of Science degree from North Carolina State University in Adult and Community College Education, and her Bachelor of Science in Family Consumer Science with a concentration in textiles and apparel from East Carolina University. It is truly my pleasure and honor to introduce to all of you our National Program Leader, Dr. Bonita Williams.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so very much, Dr. Borden. I would like to welcome you to your 2021 professional development event. Thank you for persevering through the most recent world level challenge that we faced while still offering effective programs for youth, families, and communities who were placed at risk that you served. Your innovation and creativity in programming produced positive outcomes. Thanks to the PDTA Center and the coaches for helping to make the SciFar program a success. Now, before you to introduce the guests who will extend a hearty greeting from NIFA. Now, we are pleased to have with us Dr. Carrie Castile. We're so thankful that she was able to join us today. Dr. Castile is the director of the United States Department of Agriculture's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. A Louisiana native, Dr. Castile has championed agriculture and rural issues for more than 20 years. Throughout her career, she has focused on agriculture policy and education. She served as natural resource leader and assistant professor at Louisiana State University, an associate commissioner and science advisor to the commissioner for the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry. In 2017, Dr. Castile joined USDA as state director for Louisiana Rural Development and was later named the Mid-South coordinator for USDA's Farm Production and Conservation Mission Area, serving Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Missouri. Prior to joining USDA, she was appointed by USDA Secretary Vilsack to the National Agriculture Research, Education, and Extension and Economics Advisory Board, and was appointed to the National Council for Environmental Policy and Technology by EPA Director Gina McCarthy. Dr. Castile was a delegate to the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, or APLU, Council on Agriculture, Research, Extension, and Teaching, or CARET, a member of the National Food Animal Veterinary Institute Board of Directors, and is past chair of the Southern U.S. Trade Association Operations Committee. She also is a fellow of the Food Systems Leadership Institute. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Carrie Castile.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Dr. Williams, for your leadership and all of your hard work in this effort. So I will tell you, it's wonderful to join you today and learn more about what you're doing to strive to meet the needs of those in communities who need us most and who are producing such positive impacts. Earlier this year, Secretary Vilsack laid out his priorities for USDA, which align NIFA priorities with my own. He expects that USDA will do all that we can to 1, contain the pandemic, 2, ensure racial justice and equity, 3, ensure food and nutrition security, 4, rebuild the rural economy, and 5, address the impacts of climate change. I think it sounds a lot like what cooperative extension has been doing for over 100 years and what you have been doing in SciFar for the last 30 years. I started my career in cooperative extension and worked in rural development in the Mississippi Delta in the years after Hurricane Katrina. That experience gave me an up-close, firsthand, heartbreaking view of communities, youth, and families at risk. But it also arms me with a determination to do all I can in my life and in my career to help find solutions to problems before us and around us. How proud you must be that SciFar has reached almost 350,000 participants with the formation of more than 2,400 4-H clubs over the past 3 decades. I was a 4-H'er and credit much of my success to the life lessons I was fortunate to learn through the program. I'm a strong supporter of 4-H and all positive youth development programs NIFA has to offer. We are working right now to grow our youth development staff and support across the agency. You're already making a difference daily by improving the health and healthy habits of America's young people. As we work to rebuild our nation's economy, you're doing your part, empowering 66% of the youth participating in one SciFar program to find employment through the program. Because of the work you do, homeless young adults now have a stable place to call home. When others told young people you serve they don't expect them to attend college, your programs gave them the confidence that helped 78% complete a college entrance exam. As we work to build an inclusive, equitable food system in America, we need voices and faces that represent all cultures in our society to be at the table. Your programs have proven to help many of those young people change their views and their views of science and how they want to pursue a science-related job or career. When our energetic new NIFA workforce joins forces with the land-grant university system and cooperative extension, we form an unparalleled science powerhouse with grassroots outreach education that is the envy of those around the world. I'm confident we will make real progress on the Secretary's priorities together for the good of the people we serve, because it's what you live every day, and I thank you for your service.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Castile, for those words. We really appreciate your service with NIFA. And we'd like to say a hearty thanks to Dr. Stluka, Suzanne Stluka, for joining us. She will be extending remarks as well. Dr. Suzanne Stluka earned a Bachelor of Science in Family and Consumer Sciences, Education and Nutrition from South Dakota State University, an MS degree in Family and Consumer Sciences from the University of Eastern Illinois, and a PhD degree in Human Sciences from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. She is also a registered dietitian, nutritionist. Prior to joining NIFA, Dr. Stluka served over 15 years with the Cooperative Extension Service as an associate director at Montana State University Extension and in several leadership roles at South Dakota State University Extension. Throughout her career, she has maintained an active research and extension portfolio, exploring topics such as community resiliency, farm stress, trauma, food insecurity, nutrition education, community development, among others, primarily conducted with rural, frontier, and tribal communities. She now serves as the Division Director for Family and Consumer Sciences and the Division of Youth and 4-H. Welcome, Dr. Stluka.
Dr. Williams, Dr. Stluka is getting on now.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hey everyone, my apologies. This is Suzanne.
Yes, we have opened the floor up to you, Dr. Stluka, and have rendered an introduction with your bio. So you can start whenever you'd like.
Well, thank you. My apologies. I thought it was 1 o'clock Central Time, and I don't mean to hold you up. I am going to keep this brief. I'm battling a little bit of a situation with allergies, but I did want to, again, just welcome all of you to the meetings and the learning opportunities that you are having this week with SciFar. I appreciate all of your efforts that have been ongoing. Bonita and truly investing in learning more about the SciFar program. It's a long-standing program, and I recall her telling me that it had been in existence for almost 28 years. And then I get, some of the she had provided, the work that has been over those 28 years, almost 45 publications, just the impact on cost effectiveness and just gives me, and so I can't wait to see what continues to happen with this. And of our staff here at USDA NIFA. USDA administration's priorities about that, and talking with Dr. Williams, the opportunity for workforce initiatives and enhancements and for them.
I think Dr. Stluka is cutting out from, at least for me, I think for most folks.
Let's give her a few more seconds to see if, well, I guess she's gone. Well, thank you so very much, Dr. Stluka, for sharing those words of welcome. We all know what it's like in this day and time with technology. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Stluka. The next person that I would like to introduce to you is Ms. Keisha Corbin. We're happy that she's joined the SciFar team. And I'm going to share a few words about Keisha Corbin. Keisha Corbin joined USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture's Division of Youth and 4-H from the Medical University of South Carolina's South Carolina Clinical and Translational Research Institute, where she served as the Community Engagement and Special Populations Program Coordinator, earning a bachelor's degree in psychology, minoring in biology from Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and a master's degree in public health from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Ms. Corbin hopes to make an impact at USDA NIFA through her passion in community engagement and knowledge of population health. Welcome, Keisha.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will not be extending a large greeting. I know we need to probably get on with this, but it's very nice to everyone. I look forward to working with you all. The work that you all are doing, I love reading about your projects. It's really heartwarming for me and being an advocate for youth. So thank you so much for being here, and I'm so excited to work with you all.
Thank you so much, Keisha. We're glad that you have joined NIFA and the SciFar team, and we look forward to working with you. And I will now turn it back over to Dr. Borden.
I am pleased to introduce Dr. Perkins, who is going to introduce our keynote.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully, no matter what time of the day it is, you are awake and excited. I think actually the keynote is just going to be phenomenal. When I read her bio and looked into her a little bit more, I was really excited to see that she's been able to, what I would say, do the hard balancing act of being a great scholar, but also being in the trenches and using those experiences of being in the trenches and working with young people to really inform the kind of scholarship we need. So with that, I'll go ahead and do the official bio. Dr. Torie Weiston-Serdan is a scholar and practitioner with over 15 years of teaching and youth programming experience. She's an emerging leader in the youth mentoring field. She wrote an amazing book. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, I have, and it's really quite impressive and quite useful. Critical Mentoring, a practical guide. This book has become the handbook for culturally sustaining youth work in that discipline. Outside of teaching and research, Torie runs the Youth Mentoring Action Network, a nonprofit dedicated to leveraging justice and equity mentoring. Through her community-based work, she mentors Inland Empire youth through high school into college and careers. And I think that's really a powerful statement, because I think that's how, you know, she really has been able to do her scholarship and her practical work. She also works extensively with other community-based organizations in support of youth advocacy efforts, specializing in training mentors to work with diverse youth populations and first-time college students and low-income youth. As a scholar, she examines how marginalized and minoritized youth are served by mentoring and youth development programs. She's a founding member for Mentoring California and currently serves on the boards of California Endowment, Give, Build, Share, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, LGBTQ National Advisory Council, and the research board of the National Mentoring Research Center. With all that, I'm really excited, because I think you'll walk away not only with some new knowledge, but actually some practical skills that will work really well for you, we hope. So with that, Torie, I'll pass the baton to you.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for that introduction. Thank you for you did justice to my name. So thank you so much for that. I know you all were worried, but it was fine. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to be in community with you all. It startles me just a little bit, because every time I hear my bio read, I just keep thinking, oh my God, I'm so busy. When I don't know what, there's so much work that needs to be done. And I'm sure you all, as I'm listening to everyone be introduced here, I know that the feeling is mutual, right? That everyone, we're all just doing the work, right? It's just really important for us to continue to show up every day when people are like, are you busy enough? I want to say yes, but ultimately when we're talking about young people and building a future and making an impact, it's so hard to turn down things that we know are going to help the next generation of folks, right? So again, I'm just happy to be in a like-minded community space with folks who are also just as busy, being in good trouble, right? doing all the necessary work. And Stephanie, thank you for warning me. I'm on PST. The reason I check in about my time frame is because once I start preaching, let me just say, I'm a talker. So once I get going, I'm gonna need somebody to give me a heads up, because we could be here all day.
I can help with timekeeping.
Okay. But especially when it comes to issues like this, you know, when Stephanie reached out and I was just, you know, sort of re-looking at everything that you all are doing and what I'm supposed to bring to the table here. And I saw the words, you know, identity development and empowerment, right? And I'm just thinking about, and I will give you as we go along, so, you know, sort of a little more background about me and why I do this work. But I'm thinking about everything that young people are enduring in this moment, right? I always like to ground us first in this present moment of where we are. That we are in the midst, folks were calling it justice or freedom summer, right? We're in the midst of this racial reckoning in our country, right? And I should say another racial reckoning. I feel like we continue to have them. We are still in the midst of the pandemic. I know folks are all over the place. In California, we're beginning to open up. Some folks have never closed, right? But I think on some level, we're kind of getting to this point where we feel like the pandemic is being managed, but we're still in the midst of a pandemic, right? We have all of that going on. And there's a lot more that I can name. But those two things alone are what young people, folks who are coming of age in this moment, are dealing with, right? Having been on some level in isolation for the last year, watching certain events unfurl on television, on their social media timelines, right? The consistent sort of visuals of Black death at the hands of state violence, consistent visuals of queer folks being harassed and violated in a lot of ways, still very heavily in the midst of this conversation about Me Too and women's equity among women, trans women in particular, right? So like all of these issues are happening. And you're 15, I work a lot with high school students. So you're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. You're at this very important phase of development in your life, and your context has all of this, right? That's not what's happening in your family. That's not what's happening in your immediate community, right? I'm just talking about like on a national and global scale, the context that young people are sort of coming of age in. And for me, what I am most, I will even use the word obsessed about, is as an elder in a community, how are young people watching me process? How are they watching me navigate? And then even more important, how am I leveraging my lived experience and my wisdom as an elder to help them make sense of what's happening in the world? It's a lot. It's hefty, right? And anyone who's engaged in youth work, I think on some level has this constant sort of, I don't want to call it a burden, but there's like this heaviness of responsibility that we need to make a way for young people. And I kind of pause there because I kind of, I want that sort of heaviness to sink in this moment, that we have this immense responsibility, but a lot of us are unable to really carry the weight of that responsibility because we haven't done our work. We haven't done our own work first. So when we talk about identity development, when we talk about empowerment, one of my roles in these spaces is to remind the adults that we've got to do our own work first before we ever get to the point of really trying to work with, collaborate with, build alongside young folks. Now, all of that I named, I said it in relationship to young people coming of age. But everyone on this call, we're all adults, right? We're of age. Most of us are struggling with what's happening right now, right? We can't fathom the events that are happening around us. So imagine being 14, 15 and trying to make sense. And then imagine being that age and maybe not having spaces or adults who can engage you in meaningful conversations that will help you figure out what to think or what to do about what's going on. I mean, very luckily, I think that we have a generation of young people who are pushing us to be our better selves. Right? One of the things I was most proud of this summer was young people in the streets saying, we won't tolerate this anymore. We're not going to live like this anymore. This cannot be our reality any longer. That they made it essential, right? A priority to continue on the unfinished work of the civil rights movement. What I was even more proud of is that they did it safely, right? Everyone was worried. Oh, it's a pandemic. They're out in the streets. There's a bunch of, we didn't hear about any pandemic. We didn't hear about any COVID breakouts as a result of those protests. Now, Thanksgiving was a whole other matter, right? Like we knew there were breakouts after certain holidays where people were gathering, but those young people were not only demanding to see a better day, they were modeling a way that they could be in community and they could still be in community safely in the midst of a pandemic. They've been teaching us lessons this entire time. Young folks have been holding us accountable to reimagine systems, to reimagine culture, to challenge our status quo. And I think one of our major responsibilities as adults is to first recognize that young folks are out here teaching. See, our adultism often gets in the way because we think we got all the answers and it's our job to teach young people what to do. And on some level, we need to figure out how to check that adultism, which also, I just have to say, is the first ism we all learn, right? We want to be anti-racist right now and all of those things. All of these structures and all of these issues are rooted in power. And adultism is one of the first things we learn, right? That adults are in charge, that they have all the answers, that they know everything, that we have to defer to them. So that's so we reinforce a lot of the other isms because we have this addiction to authority, especially as it relates to age. Right? So we kind of have to get out of this mindset that we are always the teachers, that we are always the leaders, that we are always the mentors. And we have to figure out how to enter into spaces with young people, especially young folks who are Black, Indigenous, Asian, right? Folks of color, queer youth, disabled youth, right? The young folks who are the most marginalized, who are often without voice, power, and choice. We have to figure out how to be in space and in community with those young folks. And that often means checking ourselves in terms of how we show up. And all of that is very connected to identity and development, right? Having an awareness of who we are, of our own identity, how we influence spaces, how we shift spaces by our presence, by our voice, right? By how we dictate what happens. We have to be very mindful of that when sharing space with young folks, and especially when sharing space with young folks who are minoritized or marginalized, right? And I use those terms carefully. When I say minoritized or marginalized, it's because I don't think, first of all, and I'm in the state of California, and, I know folks are in other places, but folks of color are not in the minority. That's another issue. Like we keep using the word minority and it's completely false. The numbers tell us otherwise, right? So folks of color are not in the minority. I use the word minoritized because we are doing that to them. We minoritize them. They are not, in fact, minorities, right? In the same way that I use the word marginalized, right? That this isn't, because I really want to stay away from language that puts them in a position of having less power, right? I want to acknowledge that these systems are working in ways that impose their values onto these communities, right? So when I use words like minoritized and marginalized, I'm being intentional in using that language. And being intentional, and this is a part of the conversation that I'm having with you all, being intentional is part of our responsibility, right? We're no longer in a place where we can enter into spaces and not be aware of our position. It's our responsibility to do the work of that awareness, to know, okay, I'm older, right? I'm a woman, I'm a man, I'm white, I'm queer, whatever our identities or our positions are, I'm in a position of authority, I have education, all of those things, we have to sort of understand how we enter a space, and then we have to act accordingly. So now when I'm in spaces with young people, because I'm doing my work at this point, right? So now when I'm in spaces with young people, I recognize, okay, I have a certain level of authority. I have this, I have that. I entered the space with this, whether I want it to be that way or not. Now I have to think about, how do I interact so that everyone in this space can feel as if they have voice, power, and choice. Right? And not in a tokenistic way, like, oh, I just want them to feel like they can have it, but in a way that illustrates to them we're on the same team, right? Whenever I talk about my work with young people, I always describe it as being a co-conspirator or a collaborator, right? I never say, oh yeah, I mentor young people, because I don't do mentoring to young people, right? I'm in community with young people, right? I walk alongside young people. I collaborate with them, but there's not this top-down hierarchical notion that I have it all figured out, that I have all the answers, that they have to listen to me, that they have to do what I say, that they got to live how I live, right? And I made all these mistakes early on in my career. Early on, young folks taught me, right? I always tell the story. I set up I spent time, as a researcher, reading all the best practices for mentoring programs. How do I put one together? What do I do? Everything like that. And then I spent a whole year doing mentoring to young people, right? We organized everything, and then we just put young people through it. And then at the end of the year, the only thing that I did well, I'll give myself a little bit credit for this, is at the end of the year, I said to young people, how was it? Give us feedback. What did you think? Right? And the young people's like, nah, fam, this ain't it. This is not, again, there had to be a level of humility, right? I had to kind of move past my adultism, my positionality as teacher, as authority figure, all of these different things that I had sort of learned. Okay, I'm listening. Like, what did I do wrong? Right? And this is where the critical aspect in terms of identity and empowerment really came in, because when I designed the mentoring program, again, I did all my own research on how mentoring works and all of those things. So I was like, I'm going to take the researcher's perspective. I'm going to look at what researchers have asked me, and I'm going to just do this, right? The other thing is I came with all of my own middle class, college graduate assumptions, right? This is purely academic. I want these young folks to be able to get through high school, get into college. It was all rooted in my own middle classness, my identity as a teacher, as someone who really valued education. I wanted them to just get all the resources they needed in relationship to that. And young people said to me, I don't like school. Right? Not every young person, but like a general consensus was like, we don't like school. We come because we have to, right? We come because we're always being told by adults that if we're not successful in school, we're going to be a failure at life, right? So we get more than enough academic push all the time. If I come to a mentoring program on my own time, I don't want more of what I'm already getting from every other adult. Every teacher is already telling me school is important. My mom's already telling me school is important. My dad, my counselor, I'm hearing that all the time. What I'd like to know more about is, like, how does this add up to maybe me going into a career, doing something that I'd love to do or I want to do, right? The other concern that I heard from young folks was really around equity, race and gender and class, et cetera. Then they started expressing, even as you're encouraging me to do well in school, no one is asking school to be better for me. So you're telling me that if I have to go to math and deal with a racist math teacher, that I should just be quiet and deal with it and get a good grade because it's going to benefit me ultimately. But nobody says, I have to navigate this teacher every day for an hour, and she makes these comments, or she does this, or she does that. And you know what adults tell me? You're not going to like everybody you have to work with. You know, the kind of sort of adjust to toxicity comments that we make to young people all the time. Well, I have to deal with it. I don't like my boss, and I still blah, 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 because I want to earn a paycheck, and your paycheck is your grade, et cetera. We have all of these sort of adult ways of saying, I'm sorry that this environment is toxic. You have to get over it and deal with it. And what I love about young people is they still have the ability to freedom dream in a way that says, why? Like, I don't care that you had to walk uphill both ways to school and that you suffered. That doesn't mean that I should have to, right? And I love that young people are taking us to task and holding us accountable, because what that conversation, after running that program and doing mentoring to young people for a year, what that conversation taught me is that my youth work needed to be more embedded in a larger context. That it was not okay for me to say to young people, do well in school. But I had to think more about how school was operating for them, right? I had to be more of their co-conspirator in terms of helping them to have conversations, in terms of helping them to find the resources, in terms of helping them to challenge things that were happening to them. All of a sudden, my mentor role became a little bit deeper, right? Because it wasn't enough that I was just spending time with the kid. Now, all of a sudden, they were asking me to be accountable and helping them to change things, right? My role kind of shifted. So now we have to have conversations about what is a microaggression and how do I navigate that as I'm trying, as I'm a 16-year-old girl who's interested in STEM and I'm not getting the messages from my male science teachers that I can be successful here. How do I deal with those microaggressions? How do I still have enough confidence in myself as a young woman to pursue STEM? Right? As queer youth who were saying to me, you know, my teacher's making these remarks toward me and my dress, or, you know, the way I show up, or they won't call on me when I raise my hand, right? I go to my counselor. I'm a young Black man and I go to my counselor and my counselor tells me I'm probably not going to go to college anyway, so I don't need to worry about taking A to G requirements, right? Those are the harder conversations. It was much easier to say to young people, do well in school, work hard, do your homework. It was harder to say, I have to figure out a way to not only help you navigate these systems in this society that is toxic. Like now I have to go from fixing you, right, which is usually the ultimate goal of mentoring and youth work, to fixing a larger system so that you can be free. And that took working on me, checking my assumptions, checking my ideas about things, centering young people, centering their voices, listening to them and what they needed, checking myself when I got threatened about the things that they were saying they needed, right? A lot of conversations with my proteges about not going to college. Oh my God, that was so hard for me. I'm a teacher, I'm a PhD, education is valuable. Like, yes, everybody go to college. And young people are saying, why? I'm going to spend $30,000 a year. I'm going to get a degree that may or may not help me get a job, or the job may not pay what I needed to pay off the loans that I had to take to get. And it was a very difficult conversation. And not all young people are saying, you know, forget about college, but some young people are. And so either I'm showing up for all of them, or I'm only showing up for some of them. So these were hard conversations for me to have, but work that I needed to do if I wanted to show up and be the best elder for the young people who needed me. So again, when we talk about identity development and empowerment, we really are talking about a larger system around all of us, where we need to deconstruct and unpack and have a really critical analysis of race and class and gender, right? Sexuality, ability, all of those things, and how they impact young people, how they impact all of us. And then we have to shift our ideas around fixing young people versus aligning or supporting young people in the fight to fix our larger society. How do we begin to show up in ways that is affirming to young folks, especially the young folks who are most marginalized and who are often without voice, power, and choice. For us in our organization, and this was true for me as an educator as well, because young people taught me they were the best teachers. It's about centering them, listening to them, really listening to young people. Even though so often my heart stops. They say things and I'm like, because I can't imagine the alternative that they are suggesting, right? I'm just sort of like steeped in this idea that it has to be this way. But I've had to train myself to listen, because even if at the heart of even if what they're saying doesn't feel possible in the moment, at the heart of what they're saying is that we need to imagine other ways. Otherwise, my generation, the generation after me, and the generation after that is going to be where you are now, because nobody has been allowed to push back. No one has been allowed to say, what about this option? No one has been allowed to say, well, why don't we develop this whole other system? Because like this one doesn't work, right? So it's been about really listening, centering them and listening to them. For us in our organization, we have young folks on the board of directors. We have young folks who work for us. We have young folks who run programs. Young people do everything that we do in our organization. And for some people, that's hard to wrap their heads around because they're like, how do you have a young person on the board of directors? That's what mentoring and youth work really is, right? And a lot of what I'm doing, it sounds impossible. But when you hear people say, oh, I'm a teacher, I'm a youth worker, you know, I work with young people in this capacity, or I'm a mentor, all of the things that we are typically pointing to are preparing young people for a future. How do we do that? By just talking at them their whole lives. And then when they turn 18 saying, okay, now go be an adult. They haven't had any practice. They haven't been granted any agency or any decision-making opportunities. They don't, and then they turn 18 and we go, okay, you're 18 now. You know a lot about American history and you know how to write an essay, go and do life. They haven't had opportunities to fail in ways that are meaningful with someone who can say, like, this is how this happened, and this is how you got here, and this is how you recover, right? Part of us employing young people is to give them a safe space to fail before they go into a larger workforce. So we can say, why don't you practice with us? Figure yourself out, because you know you're surrounded by folks who love you and care about you, and we're going to give you guidance, rather than going somewhere where, you know, no one cares and you're just going to get fired if you make a mistake, right? That's what mentoring and education and youth work is really all about, is giving young folks opportunities to learn, to fail, to question, to challenge, to build, right? Each of our board, each adult board member on our board of directors understands that they're going to mentor one of the young board members so that they will understand. By the time our young folks go through our program, through high school and into college or wherever they're going to go, they've had so many opportunities to try things. They've got a resume that's out of this world, because now they've held jobs, right? They've been in positions to lead things. They've been a part of campaigns. You know, they've done everything. And when we go back to this idea of identity development and empowerment, we go back to this idea of race equity, gender equity, equity in terms of sexuality, et cetera. Doing this for young folks who are minoritized and marginalized is one of the most radical things that you can do. Because people always equate, like, well, you say youth-centric, I think I can be youth-centric, and that sounds doable, right? But they don't make the connection between equity and being youth-centric. When I'm talking about being youth-centric, we're talking about shifting power, right? Allowing young, and I don't even like to use the word allowing because it still feels like I have power, but like making sure that young folks have opportunities to lead and use their voices. There's a saying that says, you don't have to be a voice for the voiceless, just pass the mic, right? We don't need to speak for young people. Let young people speak for themselves. We don't need to run programs for young people. Give young folks opportunities and resources to create, design, and facilitate their own programs. As much as possible, we should be working ourselves out of jobs. We should have everybody talks about succession planning and legacy planning, and then no one's investing in young people in ways that will actually let them take over when we leave. At this point, no one's going to retire because we haven't made any investments in young people. And all of this, again, is tied into this conversation of equity. Because when we talk about the folks who are most marginalized, who are without voice, power, and choice, one of the most radical things that we can do is to give them platforms and put them in positions of power where they dictate what's happening. Our whole program will change. I guarantee you, everything you do will shift. That's the importance of the work. And this is why I started with this conversation about adultism. We have to get out of the way. It doesn't mean that young people don't need us, but they don't need us to be doing everything for them all the time and dictating how everything gets done. We have to shift the way that we relate to young people. You know, one of the things I say to folks all the time is that I worry as an elder that I'll be useless to young folks. That's my worry. That young folks will eventually just say, you know what, I'm sick of dealing with every time I ask an adult, they always have blah, 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 they take over, blah, 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 blah. I'll do it without them. That is my fear. That I won't get to leverage my lived experiences, that I won't get to leverage the elder wisdom that I do possess to support the next generation of young folks, because they will see me as useless to them. So I have to position myself, I have to be in community with them in a way that encourages them to seek the wisdom that I have, so that they see me as a partner as they build a future, so that they know that they can come in as they are, as queer, as trans, as Black, as Latinx, as Asian, as whatever it is that they are, that they see a safe space where we are, right? That we've created a space that is affirming, that is loving, that is caring, that says you first, that says you lead. I got resources and a platform. How can you use this to do the work that you want to do, young person? Because I realize that the freedom dream that you have is beyond what I'm able to dream at this point. I'm now too rooted in capitalism. I'm now, addicted to my lifestyle. I got to make money. I can't be making people upset, right? Like adults, this is the issue. We don't like to admit it, but it's true. We don't want to break too many rules. We'll be as radical as we can until somebody presses us and we think, our boss is going to be too upset, and then we'll back off, right? And young folks, just not yet, depending on the age, they don't have some of those hangups. And they're willing, this is what I love about it too. They're also willing to do the work. They're like, we don't want to be where you are anyway. We don't even want to be in a space where that kind of conundrum exists. We're trying to create something completely different. We don't need you to lose everything that you have, but we definitely don't want you to get in the way. And so how can we offer this balance? How can we push enough? But, more importantly for me, it's always about thinking, how can I utilize the resources and platform that I do have to bring along a young person, right? Right now, we are in the midst of building what we hope will be a national fellowship for young Black women and girls, right? We've been doing a lot of work with Black women and girls. When I do the workshop aspect, I have a video where I'll show you guys, because a lot of folks say, what does this work actually look like when you're in programming? And so I have some video that I'm going to show in the workshop where I say like, this is what it will turn out looking like if you do it in this way. But we're doing this, we're going to launch this fellowship, and everything that we've done with in terms of our Black women and girls programming has been at the behest of Black women and girls. So when we decided that we were going to create an initiative around Black women and girls, we did what it's in our culture of our organization at this point to do, which is just talk to Black women and girls, right? We just invite them into space and we said, what is it? What do you want? What should this look like, right? And out of those conversations, leaders emerge, right? And we say, can we pay you to help us build this, right? And so right now we're working on this fellowship, and I've taken a look at the Black women and girls that I think will be best served by this fellowship. You know, I'd like look at these examples, like for example, Ziana Bryant, who's a young woman in Charlottesville, who has been at the center of this conversation around removing Confederate monuments. So she's a young activist. She's been an activist since she was 12 or something. And I think when she started that change.org petition, she was like 17 or something, but she's now been an engaged activist like her entire life, and she's only 21, right? So I look at young Black women like her and I'm like, that's who I want this fellowship to serve. So I call up Ziana Bryant. I'm not gonna run the fellowship. It's not for me to run it. So I call her up and say, hey, like, this is what's coming up. This is what Black women and girls have been telling us in our work. When we look at who we want this fellowship to serve, it's young Black women like you. Will you please, we will find the money. Will you please come and help us get this fellowship on the ground? That's what the work looks like. I don't need to be the face. I don't need to be the center, right? And as soon as she comes in with ideas. Oh, I know this young activist, that young activist, people I hadn't even heard of, didn't know they were doing work in the different corners of the world, but she's plugged in because this is her work as a young person. And so now I can't even imagine what this fellowship is going to look like with her at the head. It's certainly not going to be the fellowship I would have imagined. It's probably going to be 10 times better. But that's our work, right? So my job now is to say, my job is to just talk to foundations and get funding so that Ziana can do her work. That's my job, right? To support her, to put her in contact with, to expand her network as much as possible, to make sure that she has resources, to make sure that whatever platform I do have, I can leverage that in support of her work. That's my job as an elder, to show her the ins and outs, to help her navigate. Hey, when you're having this conversation with that person, consider this, consider that, right? That becomes our role. And again, one of the best and most radical things that I can do in terms of anti-racist work is to center the folks who are at the heart, who need it the most, right? To center them. Not to be the voice for the voiceless, but to pass the mic. But again, to get to that point, all of the things that I talked about, unpacking my own issues, right? With authority and with everything else, really strategically thinking about in my program, in my organization, how do I center young people? How do I center their voices? How do I make sure that this program is a reflection of what they want and what they have put into it, right? How do I get out the way and still inject my elder wisdom as needed, right? How do I think critically about race and how this impact and how it impacts certain spaces? How do I understand that while I love all folks, Black women, Black trans women in particular, may need a very particular space because of the type of issues that they're enduring as a population? And not being upset, right? Again, we hosted, we had April, we just decided that April was Black Women's History Month. And so we did a whole series of events and just having conversation with Black women and raising raising up issues that are related to Black women. And I wanted to make sure that we had a panel of Black trans women. And I knew when I came to that space, okay, this is not me, right? I do not identify as a Black trans woman. I have a platform and resources to do this work, but I cannot be at the forefront of this work because it doesn't belong to me. So I call up a Black trans woman and I say, we really want to put together this panel. Can I pay you to organize it? Can I pay you to facilitate it? Can I pay you to moderate it? It'll still be, we'll work together. I'll be in the background. I'll make sure that everyone's resourced, but I know this work doesn't belong to me. I don't want to be at the forefront. I want this space to be here for you all to engage in this conversation about what this work looks like. We have to have that kind of awareness. And we also have to be able to kind of set aside our ego. And a lot of us, when we come with a title, we feel like, oh, we have to at least introduce it, or we have to be on screen at some point. No, we don't. Your logo's on the flyer. Everyone knows you did it. You're good, right? We got to center the folks who need to be centered. We have to think about getting out of the way as often as possible. And Stephanie, because I can keep going. What's my time? And I also want to make sure that folks who have questions, because I see a lot of stuff going on in the chat that I can't really respond to. So I want to make sure that I can engage with the audience a little bit, if that's okay.
For sure, of course. We've got about 20 minutes till we would have said, let's open it to questions, but I agree the chat's really active. And if folks want to come in and something's really resonating with you or your thoughts, definitely jump in.
I always say I was a high school English teacher for 15 years and wait time is critical. So I don't mind a little bit of silence. I want to make sure folks have an opportunity to form thoughts or questions.
I'll talk. I'll be the first one to go for it. Thank you so much for everything you're sharing. Such a really invigorating conversation about how we support our young people and get out of the way of the new dreams and still bring our wisdom into it. Something that you said that really resonated with me, and I would love it if you could talk a little bit more about it, is really how we frame things and the power that we have when we are the ones who set the framework and the words that we choose to describe the work and the communities that we're working with. And you gave the examples of minorities and minoritizing and marginalized communities. I wonder if you could talk more about that, and if you have some recommendations on a more strength-based way to frame the communities that we work with.
For sure. Thank you so much for that question. And I just briefly mentioned that I was a high school English teacher for 15 years. So obviously language is very important to me. And I think it should be important to us too in our work. So, words I definitely stay away from are like at risk and, as I explained already, minority and things like that. Also, I try to stay away from language that becomes almost too mainstream. Everyone's talking right now about being anti-racist. Nobody really knows what that means. That bothers me. So sometimes language that becomes too mainstream, it becomes tokenized. I try to sort of either reclaim or just not utilize that language. In terms of like really being strength-based, one of the first things that I suggest is, and this is one of the reasons why you have to really have everyone at the table. Like when we talk about diversity and equity and inclusion and all those different things, I think folks, because those terms have also been tokenized, folks sort of take that for granted and they don't really realize what that means. But one of the things that we've learned is sometimes we don't know the language because the folks who would know the language aren't at the table in the first place, right? So even the term, for example, like everyone was talking about Asian American Pacific Islander, AAPI, and we've been using that to sort of describe this cross section of who we think has Asian identity, right? And Pacific Islanders are like, this is not, like, Asian identity and Pacific Islander identity are two completely different things, and you're lumping us together and we don't understand why, right? And even within the Asian American community, or Asian community in general, there are differences between and among Asians, right? And we even see colorism at play in some of those communities. Like, the lighter Asians have a certain way that they are perceived and are treated in community versus darker Asians like Cambodians, et cetera, who have a whole completely different set of experiences, right? That are not sort of the typical quote unquote Asian experience. So I think the first thing is to have a true diverse team around so that folks can represent and say, like, this is not the language that I would necessarily use to describe the community. We might consider this alternative, that alternative, that alternative, right? And I can use the same example with the queer community. As a sort of, I guess I'm middle-aged now, I refer to myself as queer. My wife, who's older than I am, came of age when queer was like a terrible word. It was like a slur, right? And she refuses to identify herself as queer. So there's like a generational difference in this idea that, like, I use queer to describe myself as a lesbian, but she does not. She uses the word lesbian because queer was bad, like when she was coming of age, right? So these are all things that we sort of need to have folks at the table so that we can have those discussions. I don't feel like I myself could speak for every one of these experiences. So we need to have a diverse enough team so folks can be able to raise these issues. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is, you know, when you talk about strengths-based, that's really how, I'm not saying you answered the question, but you kind of answered the question by saying, like, anything that you can do to identify assets and strengths in the community and highlight those and talk about how we scale those versus saying all of these deficits exist and we need to fix them is almost always the way to go, right? So, and also I think even just shifting from this idea that folks have deficits to folks have not had opportunities, right? There's a difference there as well. So saying, you know, it's not that this community is poor, it's that this community has been historically under-resourced, right? Like, we have not been putting money into this particular community for whatever reason, right? It's not that there's an achievement gap, it's that there's an opportunity gap, that there's a resource gap, right? It's not that there's anything wrong with the particular population. They just not have had the same level of investment and resource and support. And on some level, some of the standards for even framing these gaps are problematic to begin with, right? Especially in education, as we talk, and I saw somewhere in the chat, someone mentioned standardized tests. Pretty much my entire career as an educator was spent really going against the concept of a standardized test for a lot of reasons. But one of the most important reasons was because of the history related to eugenics and why that is just really problematic. And I was an AP teacher, so that was a lot of fights with my admin. But it was important to note that, like, these are problematic terms and problematic ways that we are seeing things. So how can we reframe to say there's nothing wrong with a particular population, but we need to have more of a systems analysis, right? We need to have more of an institutional analysis, and we need to highlight that the resources, the support, the investment is lacking, not the people are lacking. So when we talk about strengths-based or assets-based, it's shifting the conversation to that kind of critique, a systems critique, an institution critique, and not a critique of the community or of the people. And that's how we are really careful about our language. And I would say that that's even more accepted now than it was 10 years ago, right? Since everyone is talking about this, it's so much easier in a grant proposal or in a pitch or et cetera, when having these conversations, to critique in that way, because folks are starting to speak that language, whereas, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they were not speaking that language. I hope that answers the question. I try to be detailed, sometimes too much.
I wanted to pop in and say, I really appreciate folks popping in, and Crystal, I saw you about to talk, so I definitely want you to. But if folks can introduce themselves with their name and your institution, and that way we can all find you in the list or just know who's chatting, that'd be great. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Crystal with Virginia Cooperative Extension. I'm representing both of our land grant institutions, Virginia Tech and Virginia State University. So happy that we've had this session with you. Just so like yes, and very inspirational and learning. But I also wanted to ask this might be more of a sort of a technical question. So in the support of youth and passing the mic and stepping out of the way and yielding the floor, which is all like yes. So very practically, you talked about identifying the resources to support, and often, those come with the requirements of documenting what's the impact, what are the outcomes. So I would love to hear the ways that you are both capturing voices and then documenting, those tangible impacts, if you will, that then have to be reported back to keep those funds coming in and supports coming in.
For sure. Thank you so much for that. That's a good question. So the documentation part is always really hard for me. And most of it is because I'm really careful. I've been using this word tokenized, but I'm really careful. I don't want to tokenize the young folks who are engaging in this work. And I don't want to just like use their stories to use them. So I'm really like intentional about how do we share this story so that the young person is empowered, and not that we're like, oh, this young person was like all poor when they came in, and now, like the sort of typical stories we tell. So again, language matters. So we're always thinking about like, how can we highlight what this young person brought to the table? Maybe we can talk about resilience, we can talk about that a little bit, but how do we really highlight that they were already like bomb.com, and then they came here, and then we were able to really give them an opportunity to elevate that or to highlight it, or maybe they were bomb.com, but they didn't have a space where they could use those skills, right? Because either programs weren't available, jobs weren't available, et cetera, et cetera. So we kind of like shift the conversation in that way. I try to focus a lot more on the qualitative than the quantitative, right? That was one of the first things that I learned with that, kind of having I call it a failing mentoring program in that first year, because we were only focused on like, did their GPAs go up? Are they on track to graduate, right? Like all of the things that really institutions cared about, and young people were like, I actually care more about like, am I moving toward a bigger goal for myself, right? Like, am I able to sort of navigate the system to get through, not necessarily successfully by your terms, but by my terms? Like, am I still a whole person after I graduate from high school, right? Or did I give parts of myself up? And so we find that in looking at those kinds of things, qualitative obviously captures that in a much more nuanced way. So we do almost like exit interviews, we do focus groups, right? Some of the information, we have stopped collecting academic information very intentionally, but we still do collect, sort of other things in terms of, there are measures now in terms of like esteem, self-esteem, and sort of all of those things that you can kind of measure. They have surveys and rate scales and things like that. So we kind of pick some of those things that we think would be most appropriate to be able to share with folks. One of the things that I think is helpful in this moment, and this is exactly why I'm really excited to have joined the board of the California Endowment, is now there's all of this reporting and work around youth power building and what youth power building accomplishes. And so now we're starting to use some of that language, this idea that, first of all, we're building a beloved community for young folks, so they're feeling supported and they're feeling cared for and they're feeling resourced, which then in turn has really these positive effects in terms of belonging, in terms of being more active in community, civic engagement, civic literacy, right? So now we're able to really turn some of that language around and say, by virtue of doing these things, these are the sort of outcomes that we're getting for individual young people. I think some of the other elements too, in terms of college and career, that we talk up a lot are these real life professional and development experiences that young people get by virtue of work, right? That they have built an actual resume, that they can now say, I led this program, I ran this event, I was ahead of this social campaign, I served on a board of directors where I was able to talk to corporate funders, foundation funders, I gained these skills in terms of speaking and listening, presenting, right? So now there's like there's the bigger picture of like, we just have better kids who are more involved. And then there's a little more of a zoned in picture of like, look at how much more prepared they are for either college or career because they've had these experiences. And so those are the kinds of things we document. And now that's how we have begun to tell the story in terms of outcomes. Thank you for that question. And I hope it helps. The answer helps. I love being in conversation. Anybody else? I wanted to because this was actually recent. Oh, I saw Melissa. Go ahead, Melissa.
Sure, it's Melissa.
Oh, Melissa, thank you.
Yeah, Melissa, Mary, and Lisa put together, pronouns she and her. I'm from Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. Really excited to be able to talk to you. I sort of wrote down so that I can kind of say the question that I'm trying to get out. Completely agree that we who are white need to be handing off that mic, and we need to be better at listening to understand what it feels like to live in a white world. So how do we balance that with, okay, I'm a white cisgender woman and I need to step up to the plate, acknowledging my privilege and talking to others who are like me, sharing generously my recognition of that privilege from the system. So how do I balance that? I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So now, do you mean, I need to ask a clarifying question. Do you mean just in terms of gender, like the cross-section of gender and race, or do you mean?
I mean both in race and in gender, and then in gender identity, all of it. How do I make sure that I am handing off the mic like I need to be, like I want to be, so that others can hear those stories? And then how do I also say, but I got to step up to the plate too, Melissa, and I got to say to others who are white, who are cisgender, here's the privilege that we have, and here's how it comes about. Here's how I acknowledge that.
Thank you so much, and thanks for being willing to clarify. And really, really, really important question. And I think it's particularly important in this moment because we're in this space where we have allies, but what we need are co-conspirators, right? And I'll find at some point, I guess when we break between this and the workshop, I'll find the link where Dr. Bettina Love says this perfectly, right? Where she talks about this idea that, allies, they know all the language, they know all the right things to say, right? Like they're in the conversation, right in the middle of the conversation, but they don't often move to that next level of actually doing anything, right? It's just, it's a lot of like, oh yeah, I know all the language, I've read all the books, right? When we talk about co-conspirator, we're talking about folks with power and privilege being willing to put some of their power and privilege on the line, They got to be able to lose some stuff on some level, right? And the way that Dr. Love describes this, she tells the story about this in her book, and Abolitionist Teaching is an amazing text. That's definitely something I suggest. But she talks about the taking down of the Confederate flag. When Bree Newsom, who was a Black woman, and I don't know if y'all remember this, a couple years ago, had on the like climbing gear and everything, went up the pole, took the Confederate flag down, came down, was arrested. She tells a story about the whole game plan around that process, that it had been, among a group of activists, it was already discussed that that flag had to come down for for all of the reasons we should already know, and that somebody was going to do it. It was then decided upon that the best person to do it should be a Black woman. They were like, it's not just going to be anybody. It's going to be a Black woman. A Black woman has to take that is symbolically, as a gesture, like a Black woman has to be the person to take this down, right? So they pick her. Then they train her on how to get up the pole. They buy all the gear that they need to make sure that she has the support to get up the pole. But then, and this is really important, one of the white activists in the group, who is a partner in this, positions himself strategically at the bottom of the pole and puts his body in between the pole, her, and the police officers who are threatening to tase her down, right? That's a co-conspirator. In that moment, this idea that they said, first of all, we have this shared value, right? That we know that this flag is a problem and that it needs to come down. I also recognize that the most radical thing we could do is to have a Black woman be the face of that action, right? So we want to put her up front, but we want to support her in every way possible to make sure that she's successful in getting this flag down. So they do all of that work. But then also, when push comes to shove and the police are like threatening Bree and saying, you got to come down there, we're going to tase the pole, etc. When her white co-conspirator steps in and positions his body in a way to keep the police, because he recognizes that as a white man, it is less likely that the police are going to tase him than to tase her. And he puts himself in the way and positions himself in a way that protects her so that she can bring the flag all the way down. That's what we talk about when we mean co-conspirator. We need you to move from language and into a realm of action. And the other part of what you said, which I think was really important to me, and these are conversations that I've had even in my personal life, is about educating other white people. It's great for white folks to be on the front lines marching with us. It's great for white folks to be engaged, having conversations with us. That is awesome. What's even more important is for white people to talk to other white people in situations when they're being racist, right? To challenge family members, to challenge friends who are thinking that they can get away with saying racist things because only other white people are in the room, right? And I always use this parallel for women, particularly feminists, who are saying to men all the time, you need to hold your homeboys accountable, right? When y'all are in the locker room and this rape culture language is emerging, do you say anything? Do you check your male friends, your cousins, your boys, etc.? Do you engage in those conversations to challenge them? In the same way that we ask men to talk to other men about keeping women safe, we're asking white people to talk to other white people about keeping folks who are marginalized and minoritized safe, to challenge some of the language, the assumptions, the actions that other white folks engage in. And honestly, that unseen activism is more important than you being at marches. It's often much more important. And when we talk about youth work, and I really want to make sure I make this point. When we talk about youth work in particular, it's important as well. We have too many mentoring programs, after school programs, specialized programs that are specifically designed to take care of poor Black and brown children. Fix poor Black and brown children. We need to mentor them. They need this, they need that. Where are the mentoring programs, after school programs, special programs designed to keep young whites from being racist? And I have to let that sit, right? Everyone is running out of their suburban neighborhood to come to the urban areas to mentor poor Black and brown children. No one's teaching anti-racism to white children. We might have fewer problems with doing anti-racism work with our kids if y'all would raise your kids. People don't like it, but it's true. We have all of these things.
We're not talking.
Yes.
Sorry, we're not.
Yes, we have these things going on, and I'm really, really concerned with all of the evidence and reports on the recruiting that's happening with young white men in particular right now. All of this online recruiting that's on the dark web and all of these things targeting young white boys, getting at this whole idea of angst and all of these things that are going on. No one's paying attention. And I'm reading these reports and watching these documentaries and these specials where these moms are like, I didn't know what he was doing on the internet. Now he's popping up and he's in some neo-Nazi group, et cetera. And I'm thinking, well, where's the mentor? Where's the teacher? Where are the white adults who can intervene, who can be an anti-racist mentor in this moment that will help this young person understand that this isn't the way to go? And too often I'm hearing that they're volunteering in some other community dealing with somebody else's kid. And I think that's important to note. So as I answer your question, really a part of what I want to hone in on is the importance of white people doing work with other white people. That cannot be understated. It is one of the most important things that you can do. And thank you for asking the question and giving me an opportunity to say that.
I would like to say something. I'm Carolyn, and I work with Virginia Cooperative Extension in Sussex County, Virginia. We're in southeastern Virginia. And I just want to say kudos to you for such enlightening information. My family and I operate a small nonprofit ourselves, and it is designed to empower youth, and especially in the rural areas who don't have a lot of opportunities for outreach, to get outside and see what's outside of their world. So I just want to thank you, thank you, thank you. I've written down so many notes, and it's going to help us to understand how to better empower our youth, because that's important. And I agree, as adults, we have to take the back seat and support, as opposed to, what do you call it, adultism? That kind of stifles us sometimes. And the young people that are on the board of our nonprofit are just that. They're like 30 and in that age range, but they're at the point where they can reach the younger generation a lot better than I can. As a matter of fact, I'm learning so much from them, because I'm a child of the 50s, and sit down and be quiet is what we did, but I am also passionate about watching our young people grow and develop into what they were meant to be. So I have to take a step back, and my daughter always, Mom, we can't do that. And I listen instead of throwing my authority all over the place. So I'm enjoying what I'm doing at this point in my life. Thank you so much. You have been a great resource today. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for the affirmation. I appreciate that very much. And thank you for having young folks on the board. Look at you already doing the work.
Absolutely. I can't do it all. And I'm getting, I'm getting up in my 60s. So that doesn't make me old, but it does help me to understand that it's time to step back. And I can do that. I've been running for a long time. I can step back a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? And Stephanie, I'm still looking at you for time.
We've got about 9 more minutes to be exact. And I really appreciate folks speaking up and
thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Janelle Casson calling from Texas A&M. Thank you so much for your inspiration, for your courage, for I'm sure the patience that it's taken to have such an amazing experience in life and sharing that with all of us. So my question for you is, how did you find the courage to become that domino of change? And many times there's that level of fear. And especially as a Black woman, we don't want to come off as that angry Black woman, or, we've only got, one platform that we're standing on, or one lens that we see things from, when we understand that it's so much bigger than that. So how did you, lean in and really create that first fall for yourself?
Thank you for asking that question, because, one of the things I do try to avoid is making this sound like it's easy. I think sometimes I'm so passionate about it that it sounds like, just do it. But it is difficult. It is a difficult road. And I was reflecting as you were asking the question, I was thinking, I don't think I've arrived. So when you say, how did I sort of conquer that fear? I think on a daily basis, I'm second guessing and questioning myself, right? Oh, should I just do this meeting, or should young people be in this meeting too? Like, I'm just constantly sort of doing a lot of self-talk around reminding myself to live out my values, right? Like, if this is my value, I need to live that out. I can't just talk about it. I got to be about it, as the kids say, right? So I think it's a daily work in progress of just positive self-talk, or reminding myself that I'm doing the right thing. Also just checking in, with the young folks that I work with, and asking for advice, right? Like, is this where I should be? Is this something I need to be in? Like, or is this the meeting I need to be in with you? Is this a meeting I just need to set up and let you run? I just so just kind of always in process, right? And I feel like that's the nature of this work. We really never have arrived. Every time I think that I'm like woke, the kids are like, no, we don't use that word anymore. I'm like, I just figured out how to use pronouns. Now y'all are like, we don't want any pronouns. We want, like, everyone is just like genderless. And I'm like, I can't adjust yet. I need 5 more minutes, right? to try to figure that out and to adapt. So it's just a constant work in progress. And I would say, just in terms of courage, because again, I think I have trouble wrapping my head around the idea that I'm particularly courageous. I just think I need to wake up every day and do the work that I know needs to be done, right? And that some days I'm going to take hits. I have a community around me who will help support me when I take those hits. I make sure that those folks are in place. I am really very much intentional and strategic around my self-care, because the work is difficult, and because there's a lot of fear and anxiety and a lot of, like, issues that also are attached. I'm really careful to build time in for myself. Before I did this keynote event today, I went on a 4-mile walk with my friend, and we just chatted and, got outside and, breathed fresh air. Like, just anything that I can do to keep myself as balanced as possible, because it isn't easy. And it does require courage, and it does wear away at you. After a while, you're just like, I'm tired of fighting everything, right? This system is just much bigger than I am, and everything is a fight. So I appreciate you naming that I have courage. It's an affirmation for me. But for me, it's just something that I work really hard to just get up and live out the values that I say I care about. I thought I saw another hand, which is why I paused. I think maybe Anne wanted to speak. No.
Hi, I'm Anne from MSU. And the question is, okay, so the kids didn't like the first group you did. And obviously you took their words to heart because you're here now. But how did you get the program to change? Did you have to reteach your staff? Did you have to do that? I'm just thinking of the practical senses and that work that you had to do and how you handled at first that maybe you ran into some of the adultisms in other community partners not really willing to say, wait a minute, they're all doing that. So you could address that.
Yeah, really good questions, and thank you. And some of that I do plan to talk about a little more in the workshop in terms of like the strategic aspects, sort of what we do on a daily basis. But yeah, we did have to do a lot of retraining first of ourselves, as a core group, that it's sort of the folks who helped me put it together. And some of what I had to do, and this is the other thing that people don't often like either to hear me say, but some of what I had to do is get rid of some folks. There were just some folks who just were like, no, I'm not gonna ever be on board with letting a young person tell me what to do. And I was like, well, then you can't be here. We have an organizational culture at this point now where it's like, we laugh that young people are our bosses. We kind of like, all right, like, what are the young people having us do today? And it is just a part of our organizational culture that we're youth-centered. But at the beginning, it wasn't that way. And some people, they didn't make it to the promised land with us, right? Like they didn't make it to the mountaintop because they were not willing to do that self-work. And so yes, it did take some internal strategy of like, all right, we need to check ourselves. We need to have some conversations. How can we not make this mistake again? That's how we came around to being youth-centric, because it was like, we really got to have young people be centered. We got to listen to them. We got to lean on them. And then for folks who weren't willing to do that, we just had to do the work of saying, okay, this isn't the space for you. Because this is what we're prioritizing in terms of our values. And this is what we're prioritizing in terms of what matters to us and what matters to the young people we serve. And so, yeah, we did have to do that internal work. And I will just say that I think when we get into the workshop session, I could talk more practical, sort of hands-on some of the things that we did. But thank you for that question.
Thank you.
And that's a wonderful segue to say that it's about time for us to take a little break and then move into our next breakout session. So as Dr. Weiston-Serdan mentioned, we have a workshop session with her next, as well as 2 other sessions on program quality and STEM 4-H programs, as well as a panel with some former SCIFAR grantees to talk about their lessons learned. But I do want to take a chance to say thank you so much, Dr. Weiston-Serdan. This was a really wonderful session, and I've been so happy to see all of you so engaged in the chat, and I'm really glad that this resonated with so many, and I appreciate all of your thoughts and engagement there.
Thank you. I just want to say really briefly, I always end with this: young people deserve the best of us so that they can be better than us.
All right, it's time for a break. Again, our thanks. We'll see you all back in 15 minutes. Torie, I agree. They need the best of us so they can be better than us. So thank you. All right, see you all.
And if anyone is having trouble with Sketch or wanted to ask a question, I can hang out here for another minute or 2 and answer those in person if that's easier. So thank you all again.
I actually have a quick question for Torie. May we use your quote and give you credit? Because that was a fantastic quote.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Will you say it one more time? Because I started typing but didn't get everything.
Yes, young people deserve the best of us so that they can be better than us.
Thank you.
Torie, do you have the link for your next session?
I do. I just looked at the calendar. I do have the link.
Okay. Those are always my fears when I'm doing something, is to make sure everybody has their correct links. So thanks so much.
I'm ready to go. So about 15 minutes?
Yeah, 15 minutes. We'll see you then.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Steph, do you need anything?
No, I was just gonna hang out. I know that there's a couple of folks who are having trouble using Sketch, so I was gonna hang out for a second and then I'll leave and go to.
Then I'll give you a call on the mobile.
Okay, that's great.
Good job, Steph. Thanks for taking over there, because it just seemed natural. You were already on the screen doing it. Like, I'm not gonna intercede here. This doesn't make any sense. So
You did a great job.
I knew you were there if we needed to. Thank you.
no worries. Thank you. All right, later.